Hello, everybody. I'm glad you're here watching the video. Hope you had a great weekend. Seems a lot of people really liked the reading of the first half of Maccabees because it got more viewership than other videos. So that's a good thing. Me myself, I had a pretty good weekend. Exhausting. I ran a marathon on Saturday. Didn't really train that hard for it. So I also realized after running the race that I had been using the same running shoes for 10 months because it's October. I bought these in January. They should have been thrown away like twice by that point. I could only make it roughly 15 miles. They tracked me at 13, but that's because you cross over the finish line. I looped around the other half and made it to about 15, saw my car and walked over to it. The wife was there and I was like, I'm done. I can't do anymore. It literally felt like my feet were just hitting the concrete. And the next day, I know that I could have probably finished the race had I been wearing adequate shoes, because my quads, my hamstrings, my glutes, all that stuff is like not sore at all. What was sore was my joints, and they were aching a lot. And that comes from whenever I don't wear adequate shoes. So that tells you right there, you need the equipment, good equipment, anyways, to do things, just activities. You want the right tool for the right job, as they say. So that tells me right there I'm in good shape. I was able to run half of a marathon in about 2 hours and 25 minutes, I think it said. And I wasn't even running that hard. So there you go. That was fun. So we are going to be reading the second half of Maccabees. We're going to get started right now. I am registered in RCIA. I have an intention of joining the Catholic Church. And so I ask that you pray for me during this time, me and my family, so we can move into God's will and, join the church and learn all the stuff you're supposed to learn, all that kind of stuff. It's been, I'll say, I didn't like a certain week of RCIA. And then as soon as I was, this week was a lot better, the previous week. And so this week I'm hoping it's really good. I don't want to get into the specifics or anything like that, but the first week, it just felt like it was dragging on. While this week, it felt like everybody was more engaged and time went by faster and we learned more stuff. So that's all good stuff, right? So yeah, I am reading the Bible publicly as a public offering, hoping that it encourages others to read the Bible. And here we go. So in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, amen. Lord our God, we bless you. As we come together to ponder the scriptures, we ask you in your kindness to fill us with the knowledge of your will, so that pleasing you in all things, we may grow in every good work. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Okay, so we are going to get started with Maccabees chapter 9. And then this should take roughly an hour and a half, I think. Let's get going, though. Basically, this has been a very eventful book. When Demetrius heard that Nicanor and his army had fallen in battle, he again sent Bacchides and Alchemius into the land of Judah, along with the right wing of his army. They took road to Galilee, and camping opposite the ascent at Arbela, they captured it and killed many people. In the first month of the 152nd year, they were encamped against Jerusalem. They set out for Beera with 20,000 men and 2,000 cavalry. Judas with 3 3,000 picked men had camped at Eliza. When they saw the great number of the troops, they were very much afraid, and many slipped away from the camp until only 8,000 of them remained. When Judas saw that his army was melting away just as the battle was imminent, he was brokenhearted because he had no time to gather them together. In spite of his discouragement, he said to those who remained, "Let's go forward to meet our enemies. Perhaps we can put up a good fight against them." They tried to dissuade him, saying, "He certainly cannot. Let us save our lives now and come back with our kindred and then fight against them. Now we are too few." But Judas said, "Far be it from me to do such a thing as to flee from them. If our time has come, let us die bravely for our kindred and not leave a stain upon our honor." Then the army of I just realized I don't have the text up. Then the army of Bacchides moved out of camp and took its position for combat. The cavalry were divided into 2 squadrons, and the slingers and the archers came on ahead of the army, and in the front line were all the best warriors. Bacchides was on the right wing. Flanked by the 2 squadrons, the phalanx attacked as they blew their trumpets. Those who were on Judas' side also blew their trumpets. The earth shook with the noise of the armies, and the battle raged until from morning until evening. When Judas saw that Bacchides was on the right with the main force of his army, all the most stout-hearted rallied to him, and the right wing was crushed. Judas pursued them as far as the mountain slopes. But when those on the left wing saw that the right wing was crushed, they closed in behind Judas and those with him. The battle became intense, and many on both sides fell wounded. Then Judas fell, and the rest fled. Jonathan and Simon took their brother Judas and buried him in the tomb of their ancestors at Modin. All Israel wept for him with great lamentation. They mourned for him many days, and they said, "How the mighty one has fallen, the Savior of Israel." The other acts of Judas in his battles, the brave deeds he performed, and his greatness have not been recorded, but they were very many. After the death of Judas, the lawless raised their heads in every part of Israel, and all kinds of evildoers appeared. In those days, there was a very great famine, and the country deserted to them. Bacchides chose renegades and made them masters of the country. These sought out and hunted down the friends of Judas and brought them back to Bacchides, who punished and derided them. There was great tribulation in Israel, the like of which had not been since the time prophets ceased to appear among them. Then all the friends of Judas came together and said to Jonathan, "Ever since your brother Judas died, there has been no one like him to lead us against our enemies, both Bacchides and those of our nation who are hostile to us. Now, therefore, we have chosen you today to be our ruler and leader in his place, to fight our battle." From that moment, Jonathan accepted the leadership and took the place of Judas, his brother. When Bacchides learned of it, he sought to kill him. But Jonathan and his brother Simon and all who were with him discovered this, and they fled to the wilderness of Tekoa and camped by the waters of the pool of Ashfar. Jonathan sent his brother as leader of the convoy to implore his friends, the Nabateans, to let them deposit with them their great quantity of baggage. But the tribe of Jambri from the Medeba made a raid and seized and carried off John and everything he had. After this, word was brought to Jonathan and his brother Simon. The tribe of Jombri was celebrating a great wedding, and with a large escort, they were bringing the bride, the daughter of one of the great princes of Canaan from Nadabath. Remembering the blood of John, their brother, they went up and hid themselves under cover of the mountain. As they watched there, there appeared a noisy throng with much baggage. Then the bridegroom and his friends and kinsmen had come out to meet them with tambourines and musicians with their instruments. Jonathan and his party rose up against them with their ambush and killed them. Many fell wounded, and the rest fled toward the mountain. All their spoils were taken. Thus the wedding was turned into mourning, and the sound of their music into lamentation. Having taken their revenge for the blood of their brother, they returned to the marshes of the Jordan. When Maccabes heard of it, he came on the Sabbath to the banks of the Jordan with a large force. Then Jonathan said to his companions, "Let us rise up now and fight for our lives, for today is not like yesterday and the day before. The battle is before us. Behind us are the waters of the Jordan. On either side of us, marsh and thickets. There is no way of escape. Cry out now to heaven so that you may be delivered from the hand of our enemies." When they joined battle, Jonathan raised his hand to strike Maccabes, but Maccabes backed away from him. Jonathan and those with him jumped into the Jordan and swam across to the other side. But the enemy did not pursue them across the Jordan. About 1,000 men on Maccabes' side fell that day. On returning to Jerusalem, Maccabes built strongholds in Judah. The Jericho fortress was as well as Emos, Beth-horon, Bethel, Timnath, Parathon, and Tephon, with high walls and gates and bars. In each he put a garrison to harass Israel. He fortified the city of Beth-zur, Gazara, and the citadel, and he put troops in them and stores of provisions. He took as hostages the sons of the leading people of the country and put them in custody in the citadel at Jerusalem. In 153rd year, in the second month, Alcemius ordered the wall of the interior court of the sanctuary to be torn down, thus destroying the work of the prophets, but he only began to tear it down. Just at that time, Alcemius was stricken and his work was interrupted. His mouth was closed and he was paralyzed, so he could no longer utter a word or give orders concerning his household. Alcemius died in great agony at that time. Seeing that Alcemius was dead, Maccabes returned to the king, and the land of Judah was at rest for 2 years. Then all the lawless took counsel and said, "Jonathan and those with him are living in peace and security. Now then, let us have Maccabes return, and he will capture all of them in a single night." So they went and took counsel with him. When Maccabes was setting out with a large force, he sent letters secretly to all his allies in Judea, telling them to seize Jonathan and his companions. They were not able to do this, however, because their plan became known. In fact, Jonathan's men seized about 50 of the men of the country who were leaders in the conspiracy and put them to death. Then Jonathan and those with him, along with Simon, withdrew to Bethsai in the wilderness. He rebuilt its ruins and fortified it. When Maccabes learned of this, he gathered together his whole force and sent word to those who were in Judah. He came and encamped before Bethsai, and constructing siege engines, he fought against it for many days. Leaving his brother Simon in the city, Jonathan, accompanied by a small group of men, went out into the countryside. He struck down Adamara, and his kindred, and the tribe of Phasaron, in their encampment. These men had begun to attack, and they were going up with their forces. Simon and those with him then sallied forth from the country and set fire to the siege engines. They fought against Bacchides, and he was crushed. They caused him great distress because the enterprise he had planned was in vain. He was enraged with the lawless men who had advised him to invade the province. He killed many of them and resolved to return to his own country. Jonathan learned of this and sent ambassadors to agree on peace with him and obtain the release of the prisoners. He agreed to do as Jonathan asked. He swore an oath to him that he would never try to do him any harm for the rest of his life. And he released to him the prisoners he had previously taken from the land of Judah. Thereupon he returned to his own land and never came into their territory again. Then the sword ceased from Israel. Jonathan settled in Michmash and began to judge the people, and he eliminated the renegades from Israel. Maccabees chapter 10. In the 160th year, Alexander Epiphanes, son of Antiochus, came up and took Ptolemais. They accepted him as king, and King Demetrius heard of it. He mustered a very large army and marched out to engage him in battle. Demetrius sent a letter to Jonathan, written in peaceful terms, to exalt him. For he said, "Let us be the first to make peace with him before he makes peace with Alexander against us, since he will remember all the wrongs we have done to him, his brothers, and his nation." So Demetrius authorized him to gather an army and procure arms as his ally. And he ordered that the hostages in the citadel be released to him. Accordingly, Jonathan went to Jerusalem and read the letter to the people and to those who were in the citadel. They were struck with fear when they heard that the king had given him authority to gather an army. Those in the citadel released the hostages to Jonathan, and he gave them back to their parents. Thereafter, Jonathan dwelt in Jerusalem and began to build and restore the city. He ordered those doing the work to build the walls and to encircle Mount Zion with square stones for its fortification, and they did so. The foreigners in the strongholds that Bacchides had built took flight. All of them left their places and returned to their own lands. Only in Beth Zur did some remain of those who had abandoned the law and the commandments, for it was a place of refuge. King Alexander heard of the promises that Demetrius had made to Jonathan. He was also told of the battles and brave deeds of Jonathan and his brothers, and of the troubles that they had endured. He said, "Shall we ever find another man like him? Let us know, make him our friend and ally." So he sent Jonathan a letter written in these terms: "King Alexander sends greetings to his brother Jonathan. We have heard of you, that you are a mighty warrior and worthy of our friend. We have therefore appointed you to be high priest for your nation, and are to be called the king's friend. And you are to look after our interest and preserve friendship with us." He also sent him a purple robe and a crown of gold. Jonathan put on the sacred vestments in the 7th month of the 160th year at the Feast of Booths, and he gathered an army and procured many weapons. Let me see what the Feast of Booths is. Exactly. So it's in September to October. So it's like basically it just happened. And It's Sukkot, Sukkot. Probably mispronounced that, but that's all right. What is the Feast of Booths? And as an enormous amount of sacrifices, more than any other Israel feast. Okay. When Demetrius heard of these things, he was distressed and said, "Why have we allowed Alexander to get ahead of us by gaining the friendship of the Jews and thus strengthening himself? I too will write them encouraging words and offer honors and gifts so that they may support me." And so he sent them this message: King Demetrius sends greetings to the Jewish nation. We have heard how you have kept the treaty with us and continued in our friendship and not gone over to our enemies, and we are glad. Continue, therefore, to keep faith with us, and we will reward you with favors in return for what you did in our behalf. We will grant you many exceptions and will bestow gifts on you. I now free you and exempt all the Jews from the tribute, the salt tax, and the crown levies. Instead of collecting the third of the grain and a half of the fruit of the trees that should be my share, I renounce the right from this day forward. Neither now nor in the future will I collect them from the land of Judah or from the 3 districts and annexed from Samaria. Let Jerusalem and her treaty, her tithes, and her tolls be sacred and free from tax. I also yield my authority over the citadel in Jerusalem, and I transfer it to the high priest that he may put it such men as he choose to guard it. Every Jew who has been carried into captivity from the land of Judah in any part of my kingdom, I set at liberty without ransom, and let all their taxes, even those on their cattle, be canceled. Let all feast days, Sabbaths, new moon festivals, appointed days, and the 3 days that precede each feast day, and the 3 days that follow be days of immunity and exception for all Jews in my kingdom. No one will have the authority to exact payment from them or to harass any of them in any manner. Let 30,000 Jews be enrolled into the king's army, and allowances be given them, as is due to all the king's soldiers. Let some of them be stationed in the king's principal strongholds, and of these let some be given positions of trust in the affairs of the kingdom. Let their supervisors and their rulers be chosen from among them, and let them follow their own laws as the king has commanded in the land of Judah. Let the 3 districts that have been added to Judea from the province of Samaria be annexed to Judea, so that they may be under one rule and obey no other authority than the high priest. But Timoleus and its confides I give as a present to the sanctuary in Jerusalem for the necessary expenses of the sanctuary. I make a yearly personal grant of 15,000 silver shekels out of the royal revenues taken from appropriate places. And the additional refunds that the officials did not hand over as they are done in the first years shall henceforth be handed over to the service of the temple. Moreover, the dues of the 5,000 silver shekels that used to be taken from the revenue of the sanctuary every year shall be canceled, since these funds belong to the priests who perform the services. All who take refuge in the temple of Jerusalem or in any of its precincts because of money they owe the king or because of any other debt shall be released, together with all the goods they possess in my kingdom. The cost of rebuilding and restoring the structures of the sanctuary shall be covered of the royal revenue. Likewise, the cost of building the walls of Jerusalem and the fortifying it all around, and of building walls in Judea shall be donated from the royal revenue. When Jonathan and the people heard these words, they neither believed nor accepted them, for they remembered the great evil that Demetrius had done in Israel, and the great tribulation that he brought upon them. They therefore decided in favor of Alexander, for he had been the first to address them peacefully, and they remained his allies for the rest of his life. Then King Alexander gathered together a large army and encamped opposite Demetrius. The two kings joined battle, and when the army of Demetrius fled, Alexander pursued him and overpowered his soldiers. He pressed the battle hard until sunset, and Demetrius fell that day. Alexander sent ambassadors to Ptolemy, king of Egypt, with this message: "Now that I have returned to my realm, take my seat on the throne of my ancestors, and established my rule by crushing Demetrius and gaining control of my country. For I engaged him in battle. He and his army were crushed by us, and he assumed his royal throne. Let us now establish friendship with each other. Give me now your daughter for my wife, and as your son-in-law, I will give to you and to her gifts worthy of you." King Ptolemy answered in these words: "Happy the day on which you returned to the land of your ancestors and took your seat on their royal throne. I will do for you what you have written, but me and Ptolemaeus, so that we may see each other, and I will become your father-in-law as you have proposed." So Ptolemy, with his daughter Cleopatra, set out from Egypt and came to Ptolemaeus in 162nd year. There King Alexander met him, and Ptolemy gave him his daughter Cleopatra in marriage. And their wedding was celebrated at Ptolemais with great splendor, according to the custom of kings. King Alexander also wrote to Jonathan to come and meet him. So he went with pomp at Ptolemais, where he met the two kings and gave them and their friends silver and gold and many gifts, and thus won their favor. Some villainous men of Israel, transgressors of the law, united against him to accuse him, but the king paid no heed to them. The king ordered Jonathan to be divested of his garments and to be clothed in royal purple, so it was done. What's divested mean? Divest? Divested? Rid oneself of something that one no longer wants or requires, such as a business interest or investment. When the accuser saw the honor paid to him according to the king's proclamation, and him clothed in purple, they all fled. And so the king honored him, encircling him among his chief friends, and made him governor and chief of the province. So Jonathan returned in peace and happiness in Jerusalem. In the 165th year, Demetrius, son of Demetrius, came to Crete, to the land of his ancestors. When King Alexander heard of it, he was greatly troubled and returned to Antioch. Demetrius set Apollonius over Coelesyria. Having gathered a large army, Apollonius encamped at Jamnia. From there he sent this message to Jonathan the high priest: "You are the only one who resists us. I am laughed at and put to shame on your account. Why are you exercising authority against us in the mountains? If you have confidence in your foes, come down now to us in the plain and let us test each other's strength there, for the forces of the cities are on my side. Inquire and find out who I am and who the others are who are helping me. People are saying that you cannot make a stand against us because your ancestors were twice put to flight in their own land. Now, you two will be unable to withstand our cavalry and such a force in the plain where there is not a stone or a pebble or a place to flee. When Jonathan heard the message of Apollonius, he was provoked. Choosing 10,000 men, he set out from Jerusalem, and Simon, his brother, joined him to help him. He encamped near Joppa, but the people of the city shut him out because Apollonius had a garrison in Joppa. When they attacked it, the people of the city became afraid and opened the gates, and so Jonathan took possession of Joppa. When Apollonius heard of it, he drew up 3,000 cavalry and a large force of infantry. He marched toward Azotus as though he were going on through, but at the same time he was advancing into the plain, because he had such a large number of cavalry to rely on. Jonathan pursued him toward Azotus, and the armies engaged in battle. Apollonius, however, left 1,000 cavalry in hiding behind them. Jonathan discovered that there was an ambush behind him. His army was surrounded. From morning until evening, they showered his troops with arrows. But the troops held their ground as Jonathan had commanded, while the enemy's horses became tired out. When Simon brought forward his force and engaged the phalanx in battle, since the cavalry were exhausted, the phalanx was caused by him and fled. While the cavalry too were scattered over the plain, they fled to Azotus and entered Beth Dragon, the temple of their idol, to save themselves. But Jonathan burned and plundered Azotus with its neighboring towns and destroyed by fire both the temple of Dragon or Dagon and those who had taken refuge in it. Those who fell by the sword, together with those who were burned alive, came to about 8,000. Then Jonathan left there and encamped Ascalon, and the people of that city came out to meet him with great pomp. Jonathan and those with him then returned to Jerusalem with much spoil. When King Alexander heard these events, he accorded new honors to Jonathan. He sent him a gold buckle, since as is usually given to king's kinsmen. He also gave him Ekron and all its territory as a possession. Chapter 11. Is this another one that's like 80 verses? Not quite. Then the king of Egypt gathered forces as numerous as the sands of the seashore and many ships, and he sought to deceit to take Alexander's kingdom and add it to its own. He set out for Syria with peaceful words, and the people in the cities opened their gates and welcomed him, as King Alexander had ordered them to do, since Ptolemy was his father-in-law. But when Ptolemy entered the cities, he stationed a garrison of troops in each one. As they neared Azotus, they showed him the temple of Dagon, destroyed by fire, Azotus and its suburbs demolished, corpses lying about, and the charred bodies of those burned in the war, for they had heaped them up along his route. They told the king what Jonathan had done in order to denigrate him, but the king said nothing. Jonathan met the king at Pomp at Joppa, and they greeted each other and spent the night there. Jonathan accompanied the king as far as the river called Eleutherus, and then returned to Jerusalem. And so King Ptolemy took possession of the cities of the seacoast as far as Caesarea by the sea, plotting evil schemes against Alexander all the while. He sent ambassadors to King Demetrius, saying, "Come, let us make a covenant with each other. I will give you my daughter, whom Alexander was married, and you shall reign over your father's kingdom." I regret that I gave him my daughter, for he has sought to kill me. He was criticizing Alexander, however, because he coveted his kingdom. And after taking his daughter away, Ptolemy gave her to Demetrius and broke with Alexander. The enmity between them was now evident. Then Ptolemy entered Antioch and assumed the crown. As Asia, thus he set upon his head two crowns, that of Egypt and that of Asia. Now, King Alexander was in Sicilia at that time because the people of that region had revolted. When Alexander heard the news, he came against Ptolemy in battle. Ptolemy marched out and met him with a strong force and routed him. When Alexander fled to Arabia to seek protection, King Ptolemy was triumphant. Zabdiel, the Arabian, cut off Alexander's head and set it to Ptolemy. But 3 days later, King Ptolemy himself died, and his troops in the strongholds were killed by the inhabitants of the strongholds. Thus, Demetrius became king in the 167th year. In those days, Jonathan gathered together the people of Judea to attack the citadel in Jerusalem, and they set up many siege engines against it. But some transgressors of the law, enemies of their own nation, went to the king and informed him that Jonathan was besieging the citadel. When Demetrius heard this, he was enraged, and as soon as he heard it, he set out and came to Ptolemaeus. He wrote to Jonathan to discontinue the siege and to meet him for a conference at Ptolemaeus as soon as possible. On hearing this, Jonathan ordered the siege to continue. He selected some elders and priests of Israel and put himself at risk. Taking with him silver, gold, and apparel, and many other presents, he went to the king at Ptolemaeus and found favor with him. Although certain renegades of his own nation kept on bringing charges against him, the king treated him just as his predecessors had done and exalted him in the presence of all his friends. He confirmed him in the high priesthood and in the other honors he had previously held, and had him enrolled among his other friends. Jonathan asked the king to exempt Judea and the 3 districts of Samaria from tribute, promising him in return 300 talents. The king agreed and wrote a letter to Jonathan about these matters as follows. King Demetrius sends greetings to his brothers, Jonathan, and to the Jewish nation. We are sending you, for your information, a copy of the letter that we wrote to Lasthenes, our kinsman, concerning you. King Demetrius sends greetings to his father, Lasthenes. Upon the Jewish nation, who are our friends and observe our obligations to us, we have decided to bestow benefits because of the good will they show us. Therefore, we confirm their possession not only of the territory of Judea, but also the 3 districts of Aphamaria, Lydia, and Ramathaim. These districts, together with all of their dependencies, are hereby transferred from Samaria to Judea for those who offer sacrifices in Jerusalem in lieu of the royal taxes the king used to receive yearly from the produce of earth and trees. From payment to the other things that would be henceforth be due to us, namely the tithes and taxes, as well as the salt tax and the crown tax, from all of these we grant them release, henceforth and forever. Not one of these provisions shall ever be revoked. To see it, therefore, that a copy of these instructions be made and given to Jonathan, let it be displayed on the holy mountain in the conspicuous place. When King Demetrius saw that the land was peaceful under his rule, and that he had no opposition, he dismissed the entire army each to his own home, except the foreign troops which he had hired from the islands of the nations, so that all the soldiers who had served under his predecessors became hostile to him. When a certain Trypho, who had previously supported Alexander, saw all the troops were grumbling against Demetrius, he went to Emelik the Arabian, who was raising Alexander's young son Antiochus. Trypho kept urging Amalek to hand over the boy to him so that he might succeed his father as king. He told him of all that Demetrius had done and of the hostility his soldiers had for him, and he remained there for many days. Meanwhile, Jonathan sent the request to King Demetrius to withdraw the troops in the citadel from Jerusalem and from the other strongholds, for they were constantly waging war on Israel. Demetrius in turn sent this word to Jonathan: I will do not only this for you and your nation, but I will greatly honor you and your nation when I find the opportunity. Now therefore, you will do well to send men to fight for me, because all my troops have revolted. So Jonathan sent 3,000 good fighting men to him at Antioch. When they came to the king, he was delighted over their arrival. The populace, 120,000 strong, amassed in the center of the city in an attempt to kill the king. So the king took refuge in the palace, while the populace gained control of the main streets of the city and prepared for battle. Then the king called the Jewish force to his aid. They all rallied around him and spread out through the city. On that day, they killed about 100,000 in the city. At the same time, they set the city on fire and took much spoil. Thus, they saved the king. When the populace saw that the Jewish force controlled the city, they lost courage and cried out to the king in supplication, extend the hand of friendship to us and make the Jews stop attacking us and the city. So they threw down their weapons and made peace. The Jews thus gained honor in the eyes of the king and all his subjects, and they became renowned throughout his kingdom. Finally, they returned to Jerusalem with much plunder. But when King Demetrius was sure of his royal throne, the land was peaceful under his rule. He broke all his promises and became estranged from Jonathan. Instead of repaying Jonathan for all the favors he had received from him, he caused him much distress. After this, Trypho returned and brought with him the young boy, Antiochus, who became king and put on the diadem. All the soldiers whom Demetrius had discharged rallied around Antiochus and fought against Demetrius, who was routed and fled. Trypho captured the elephants and occupied Antioch. Then young Antiochus wrote to Jonathan, I confirm you in the high priesthood and appoint you ruler over the 4 districts, and to be one of the king's friends. He also sent him gold dishes and a table service, gave him the right to drink from gold cups and to dress in royal purple and to wear a gold buckle. Likewise, he made Jonathan, brother Simon, governor of the region from the ladder of Tyre to the borders of Egypt. Jonathan set out and traveled through the province west of Euphrates and its cities, and all of the forces of Syria espoused his cause as allies. When he arrived at Ascalon, the citizens welcomed him with pomp. But when he set out for Gaza, the people of Gaza shut him out. So he besieged it and burned and plundered its suburbs. Then the people of Gaza appeared to Jonathan, and he granted them terms of peace. He took the sons of the leaders as hostages and sent them to Jerusalem. He then traveled on through the provinces as far as Damascus. Jonathan heard that the generals of Demetrius had come with a strong force to Kadesh in Galilee, intending to remove him from office. So he went to meet them, leaving his brother Simon in the province. Simon encamped against Beth Zur, attacked it for many days, and shut in the inhabitants. They appealed to him and granted them terms of peace. He expelled them from the city, took possession of it, and put a garrison there. Meanwhile, Jonathan and his army pitched their camp near the waters of Gennesaret, and at daybreak they went to the plain of Hazron. There the army of foreigners met him on the plain. Having first dispatched an ambush in the mountains, this army mounted a frontal attack. And then those in ambush rose out of their places and joined in the battle. All of Jonathan's men fled. No one stayed except the army commanders, Mattathias, son of Absalom, and Judas, son of Shalphi. Jonathan tore his clothes, threw dust on his head, and prayed. Then he went back to the camp. Then he went back to the battle and routed them, and they fled. Those of his men were running away saw it and returned to him. And with him they pursued the enemy as far as their camp in Kadesh, and there they encamped. About 3,000 of the foreign troops fell on that day. Then Jonathan returned to Jerusalem. I'm telling you, I've read 3 chapters and it's been like 50 minutes. Maccabees does not play around with the length of its chapters. And the thing is Second Maccabees, the chapters aren't as long and there's not as many chapters. But yeah, chapter 12. When Jonathan saw that the time was right, he chose men and sent them to Rome to confirm and renew the friendship with the Romans. He also sent letters to the Spartans and other places to the same effect. After reaching Rome, the men entered the Senate chamber and said, "The high priest Jonathan and the Jewish people have sent us to renew the friendship and alliance of earlier times with them." The Romans gave them letters addressed to authorities in various places, with the request to provide them with safe conduct to the land of Judah. This is a copy of the letter that Jonathan wrote to the Spartans. Jonathan, the high priest, the senate of the nation, the priests, and the rest of the Jewish people send greetings to their brothers, the Spartans. Long ago, a letter was sent to the high priest Onias from Arius, who then reigned over you, stating that you are our brothers, as the attached copy shows. Onias welcomed the envoy with honor and received the letter, which spoke clearly of alliance and friendship, though we need no proof of these things, since we have for our encouragement the holy books that are in our possession. We have ventured to send word to you for the renewal of brotherhood and friendship, lest we become strangers to you. A long time has passed since you sent your message to us. We, on our part, have unceasingly remembered you in the sacrifices and prayers that we offer on our feasts and other appropriate days, as it is right and proper to remember, brothers. We likewise rejoice in your renown. But many tribulations and many wars have beset us, and the kings around us have attacked us. We do not wish to be troublesome to you and to the rest of our allies and friends in these wars. For we have the help of heaven for our support, and we have been saved from our enemies, and our enemies have been humbled. So we have chosen Numenius, son of Antiochus, and Antipater, son of Jason, and we have sent them to the Romans to renew with them the friendship and alliance of earlier times. We have also ordered them to come to you and to greet you and to deliver you our letter concerning the renewal of our brotherhood. Therefore, kindly send us an answer on this matter. This is a copy of the letter that they sent to Onias. Arius, king of the Spartans, sends greetings to Onias, the high priest. A document has been found stating that the Spartans and the Jews are brothers and that they are of the family of Abraham. Now that we have learned this, kindly write to us about your welfare. We, for our part, declare to you that our animals and your possessions are ours, and ours are yours. We have therefore given orders that you should be told of this. Then Jonathan heard that the officers of Demetrius had returned to attack him with stronger army than before. So he set out from Jerusalem and met them in the territory of Hamath, giving them no opportunity to enter his providence. The spies he had sent into their camp came back and reported to him that the enemy were preparing to attack them at night. Therefore, when the sun set, Jonathan ordered his men to keep watch with their weapons at the ready for battle throughout the night, and he set outposts around the camp. When the enemy heard that Jonathan and his men were ready for battle, their hearts sank with fear and dread. They lighted fires in their camp and then withdrew. But because Jonathan and his men were watching the campfires burning, they did not know until the morning what had happened. Then Jonathan pursued them, but he could not overtake them, for they had crossed the river Eleutherius. So Jonathan turned aside against the Arabians, who are called Zabadeans, and he struck them down and plundered them. Then he broke camp, marched on towards Damascus, and traveled through the whole region. Simeon also set out and traveled as far as Ascalon and its neighboring strongholds. He then turned to Joppa and took it by surprise, for he heard that its people intended to hand over the stronghold to the supporters of Demetrius. He left a garrison there to guard it. When Jonathan returned, he assembled the elders of the people, and with them he made plans for building strongholds in Judea, for making the walls of Jerusalem still higher, and for erecting a high barrier between the citadel and the city, to separate it from the city and isolate it so that its garrison would neither buy nor sell. The people therefore gathered together to build up the city, for part of the wall of the eastern valley had collapsed. And Jonathan repaired the quarter called Caphanatha. Simon likewise built up Adada in the Shephelah and fortified it by installing gates and bars. Then Trypho sought to become king of Asia, assume the diadem, and do violence to King Antiochus. But he was afraid that Jonathan would not permit him, but would fight against him. Looking for a way to seize and kill him, he set out and came to Beth Shan. Jonathan marched out to meet him with 40,000 picked fighting men and came to Beth Shan. But when Trypho saw that Jonathan had arrived with a large army, he was afraid to do him violence. Instead, he received him with honor, introduced him to all his friends, and gave him presents. He also ordered his friends and soldiers to obey him as they would himself. Then he said to Jonathan, "Why have you put all these people to so much trouble when we are not at war? Now come pick out a few men to stay with you. Send the rest to their homes, and then come with me to Ptolemais. I will hand it over to you together with other strongholds and the remaining troops, as well as all the officials. Then I will turn back and go home. That is why I came here." Jonathan trusted him and did as he said. He dismissed his troops, and they returned to the land of Judah. But he kept with him 3,000 men, of whom he left 2,000 in Galilee, while 1,000 accompanied him. Then, as soon as Jonathan entered Ptolemais, the people of Ptolemais closed the gates and seized him. All who had entered with him, they killed with the sword. Then Trypho sent soldiers and cavalry to Galilee and the great plain to destroy all Jonathan's men. These, upon learning that Jonathan had been captured and killed along with his companions, encouraged one another and went out in close formation ready to fight. As their pursuers saw that they were ready to fight for their lives, they turned back. Thus, all Jonathan's men came safely into the land of Judah. They mourned Jonathan and those who were with him. They were in great fear, and all Israel fell into deep mourning. All the nations round about sought to crush them. They said, "Now that they have no leader or helper, let us make war on them and wipe out their memory from the earth." So we're now at chapter 13. That's about halfway. And we're at an hour, basically. I feel like I was able to read, I think I've read it in an hour and a half, the previous one. But this one's taken longer. Maybe it's because the verses are longer. The chapters are longer. I'm not sure. This one's not as long. It's only 53, which is usually a long chapter for me. Okay, chapter 13. When Simon heard that Trypho was gathering a large army to invade and ravage the land of Judah, and saw that the people were trembling with terror, he went up to Jerusalem. There he assembled the people and exhorted them in these words: "You know what my brothers, and my father's house have done for the laws and the sanctuary, what battles and hardships we have seen. For the sake of this, for the sake of Israel, all my brothers have perished, and I alone am left. Far be it from me then to save my own life in any time of distress, for I am not better than my brothers. But I will avenge my nation and the sanctuary, as well as your wives and children, for out of hatred all the Gentiles have united to crush us." As the people heard these words, their spirit was rekindled. They shouted in reply, "You are our leader in place of your brothers Judas and Jonathan. Fight our battles, and we will do everything that you tell us." So Simon mustered all the men able to fight and hastened to complete the walls of Jerusalem, fortified it on every side. He set Jonathan, son of Absalom, and Joppa with a strong force. Jonathan drove out the occupants and remained there. Then Trypho moved to Ptolemais with a large army to invade the land of Judah, bringing Jonathan with him as prisoner. Simon encamped at Adadia, facing the plain. When Trypho learned that Simon had succeeded his brother Jonathan and that he intended to fight him, he sent ambassadors to give him this message: "It was on account of the money your brother Jonathan owed the royal treasury in connection with the offices that he held that we have detained him. Now send 100 talents of silver and 2 of his sons as hostages to guarantee that he is set free. He will not revolt against us, and we will release him." Simon knew that they were speaking deceitfully to him. Nevertheless, for fear of provoking much hostility among the people, he sent the money and the boys, lest the people say, "Jonathan perished because I would not send Trypho the money and the boys." So he sent the boys and the 100 talents, but Trypho broke his promise and would not release Jonathan. Next, Trypho moved to invade and ravage the country. His troops went around by the road that leads to Adora. But Simon and his army moved along opposite him everywhere he went. The people in the citadel kept sending emissaries to Trypho, pressing him to come to them by the way of the wilderness, and to send them provisions. Although Trypho got all his cavalry ready to go, there was a very heavy snowfall that night, and he could not go on account of the snow. So he left for Gilead. When he was approaching Bascamea, he had Jonathan killed and buried him there. Then Trypho returned to his own land. Simon sent for the remains of his brother Jonathan and buried him in Modin, the city of his ancestors. All Israel bewailed him with solemn lamentation, mourning over him for many days. Then Simon erected over the tomb of his father and his brothers a monument of stones, polished back, front and back, and raised high enough to be seen at a distance. He set up 7 pyramids facing one another for his father and his mother and 4 brothers. For the pyramids, he devised a setting of massive columns, which he adorned with suits of armor as a perpetual memorial, and next to the armor carved ships which could be seen by all who sailed the sea. The tomb which he built at Modin is there to the present day. Trypho dealt treacherously with the young king Antiochus. He killed him and became king in his place, putting on the crown of Asia. Thus he brought much evil on the land. Simon, for his part, built up the strongholds of Judea, fortifying them all around with high towers, thick walls, and gates with bars. And he stored up provisions in the strongholds. Simon also chose men and sent them to King Demetrius to obtain for the land an exemption from taxation, since Trypho did nothing but plunder. King Demetrius replied favorably and sent him the following letter. King Demetrius sends greetings to Simon, high priest and friends of kings, and to the elders and the Jewish people. We have received the gold crown and the palm branch that you sent. We are ready to make a lasting peace with you and to write to our officials to grant you exemption. Whatever decrees we have made in your regard remain in force, and the strongholds that you have built you may keep. We pardon any oversights and offenses committed up to now, as well as the crown tax that you owe. Any other tax that used to be collected in Jerusalem shall no longer be collected there. Any of you qualified for enrollment in our service may be enrolled. Let there be peace between us. Thus, in the 170th year, the yoke of the Gentiles was removed from Israel. And the people began to write in their records and contracts in the first year of Simon, great high priest, governor, and leader of the Jews. In those days, Simon besieged Gazera and surrounded it with troops. He made a siege machine and brought it up against the city and attacked and captured one of the towers. Those in the siege machine leaped down in the city, and a great tumult arose there. Those in the city, together with their wives and children, went up on the wall with their garments rent and cried out loud voices, begging Simon to grant them terms of peace. They said, "Treat us not according to our evil deeds, but according to your mercy." So Simon came to terms with them and did not attack them. He expelled them from the city, however, and he purified the houses in which there were idols. Then he entered the city with hymns and songs of praise. After removing from it everything that was impure, he settled there people who observed the law. He improved its fortifications, and built himself a residence. The people in the citadel in Jerusalem were prevented from going out into the country and back to buy or sell, and they suffered greatly from hunger, and many of them died of starvation. They cried out to Simon, and he gave them terms of peace. He expelled them from the citadel and cleansed it of impurities. On the 23rd day of the second month, in in the 171st year, the Jews entered the citadel with shouts of praise, and waving palm branches, and playing harps and cymbals and lyres, and the singing of hymns and canticles, because a great enemy of Israel had been crushed. Simon decreed that this day should be celebrated every year with rejoicing. He also strengthened the fortifications of the Temple Mount alongside the citadel, and he and his people dwelt there. Seeing that his son John was now a grown man, Simon made him commander of his soldiers, and he dwelt in Gazara. About 50 verses. That's pretty good. I think we'll be done in about a half hour, maybe less. Chapter 14. In the 172nd year, King Demetrius assembled his army and marched into Media to obtain help so that he could fight Trypho. When Arsaces, king of Persia and Media, heard that Demetrius had entered his territory, he sent one of his generals to take him alive. The general went forth and attacked the army of Demetrius. He captured it and brought him to Arsaces, who put him under guard. The land was at rest all the days of Simeon, who sought the good of his nation. His rule delighted his people, and his glory all his days. As his crowning glory, he took Joppa for a port, and he made it gateway to the isles of the sea. He enlarged the borders of his nation and gained control of the country. He took many prisoners of war, and he made himself master of Gazara, Beth Zur, and the citadel. He cleansed the citadel of its impurities. There was no one to withstand him. The people cultivated their land in peace, and the land yielded its produce. The trees of the field their fruit. The trees of the field their fruit. Old men sat in the squares. All were talking about the good times, while the young men of the glorious remnant of war. He supplied the cities with food and equipped them with means of defense, till his glorious name reached the ends of the earth. He brought peace to the land, and Israel was filled with great joy. Everyone sat under his vine and fig tree, with no one to disturb them. No attacker was left in the land. The kings in those days were crushed. He strengthened all the lowly among his people, and the zealous for the law. He destroyed the lawless and the wicked. The sanctuary he made splendid, and multiplied its furnishings. When people in Rome and even in Sparta heard that Jonathan had died, they were deeply grieved. But when they heard that his brother Simon had become high priest in his place and was master of the territory and its cities, they sent him inscribed tablets of bronze to renew with him the friendship and alliance that they had established with his brothers Judas and Jonathan. These read before the assembly in Jerusalem. This is a copy that the letter. This is a copy of the letter that the Spartans sent. The rulers and the city of the Spartans send greetings to Simon the high priest. The elders, the priests, and the rest of the Jewish people are brothers. The ambassadors sent to our people have informed us of your glory and renown, and we rejoiced at their coming. In accordance with what they said, we have recorded the following in the public decrees. Numenius, son of Antiochus, and Antipater, son of Jason, ambassador of the Jews, have come to renew their friendship with us. The people have resolved to receive these men with honor and to deposit a copy of their words in the public archives, so that the people of Sparta may have a record of them. A copy of this decree has been made for Simon the high priest. After this, Simon sent Numenius to Rome with a large gold shield weighing 1,000 manias to confirm the alliance with the Romans. I want to see what a Manias is. It's got to be some sort of weight. Sixteenth of a talent. I don't know what a talent is either, but it's all right. It sounds like it's almost, if it's a 16th of a talent, it almost sounds like that's a kind of like an equivalent of a ancient times of our current day pounds. If a Manias is 16 of those, I'm probably wrong, but that's just a guess. When the people heard of these things, they said, "How shall we thank Simon and his sons? He and his brothers and his father's house have stood firm and repulsed Israel's enemies, and so have established its freedom." So they made an inscription on bronze tablets, which they affixed to pillars on Mount Zion. The following is a copy of the inscription. On the 18th day of Elul, in the 172nd year, that is, the third year under Simon, the great high priest, and Azramiel, in a great assembly of priests, people, rulers of the nation, and elders of the region, the following proclamation was made to us. Since there have often been wars in our country, Simon, son of the priest Mattathias, a descendant of Jorib, and his brothers have put themselves in danger and resisted the enemies of their nation, so that their sanctuary and law might be maintained. And they have thus brought great glory to their nation. Jonathan rallied the nation, became their high priest, and was gathered to his people. When their enemies sought to invade and ravage their country and to violate their sanctuary, Simon rose up and fought for his nation, sending large sums of his own money to equip his nation's forces and give them their pay. He fortified the cities of Judea, especially the border city of Beth Zur, formerly the site of the enemy's weaponry, and he stationed there a garrison of Jewish soldiers. He also fortified Joppa by the sea and Gazara on the border of Azotus, a place previously occupied by the enemy. These cities he settled with Jews and furnished them with all that was necessary for their restoration. When the people saw Simon's fidelity and the glory he planned to bring to his nation, he made him their leader and high priest because of all he had accomplished and the justice and fidelity that he had shown his nation. In every way he sought to exalt his people. In his time and under his guidance, they succeeded in driving the Gentiles out of their country, and those in the city of David in Jerusalem, who had built for themselves a citadel from which they used to sally forth to defile the environs of the sanctuary, inflict grave injury on its purity. Environs? What the heck? Surrounding area or district. I guess that makes sense. I was like, that's like, a segment of environment. So that makes sense. In this citadel, he stationed Jewish soldiers and he strengthened its fortifications for the security of the land and the city, while he also brought up the wall of Jerusalem to a greater height. Consequently, King Demetrius confirmed him in the high priesthood, made him one of his friends, and conferred great honor on him. This was because he had heard that the Romans had addressed the Jews as friends, allies, and brothers, and that they had received Simon's envoys with honor, and that the Jewish people and their priests had decided the following: Simon shall be their leader and high priest forever until a trustworthy prophet arises. He shall act as governor over them and shall have charge of the sanctuary to make regulations concerning its functions and concerning the country, its weapons and strongholds. He shall be obeyed by all. Contracts in the country shall be written in his name, and he shall be clothed in purple and gold. It shall not be lawful for any of the people or priests to nullify any of these decisions, or to contradict the orders given by him, or to convey an assembly in the country without his consent, to be clothed in purple or wear a gold buckle. Whoever acts otherwise or violates any of these precipitations shall be liable to punishment. Thus, all the people approved of granting Simon the right to act in accord with these decisions, and Simon accepted and agreed to be high priest, governor, and ethnarch of the Jewish people, and priests, and that have authority over all. It was decreed that this inscription should be engraved on bronze tablets to be set up in a conspicuous place in the precincts of the sanctuary, and that copies of it should be deposited in the treasury, where they would be available to Simon and his sons. So we're on chapter 15. We got 2 chapters left. Antiochus, son of King Demetrius, sent a letter from the islands to the see of Simon, the priest and ethnarch of the Jews, and to all the nation, which read as follows. King Antiochus sends greetings to Simon and the high priest and ethnarch, and to the Jewish nation. Whereas certain villains have gained control of the kingdom of our ancestors, and I intend to reclaim it, that I may restore to its former state, I have recruited a large number of mercenary troops and equipped warships. I intend to make a landing in the country so that I may take revenge on those who have ruined our country and laid waste many cities in my kingdom. Now, therefore, I confirm to you all the tax exemptions, and that the kings before me granted you, and whatever other privileges they concede to you. I authorize you to coin your own money as legal tender in your country. Jerusalem and its sanctuary shall be free. All the weapons you have prepared and all the strongholds you have built and now occupy shall remain in your possession. All debts, present or future, due to the royal treasury shall be canceled for you, now and for all time. When we establish our kingdom, we will greatly honor you and your nation and the temple, so that your glory will be manifest in all the earth. In the 174th year, Antiochus invaded the land of his ancestors, and all the troops rallied to him, so that few were left with Tryphon. Pursued by Antiochus, Tryphon fled to Dor by the sea, realizing what troubles had come upon him now that his soldiers had deserted him. Antiochus encamped before Dor with 120,000 infantry and 8,000 cavalry. While he surrounded the city, his ships closed from the sea, so that he pressed it hard by land and sea and let no one go in or out. Meanwhile, Nehemiah and his companions came from Rome with letters containing this message to various kings and countries. Lucius, consul of the Romans, sends greetings to King Ptolemy. Ambassadors of the Jews, our friends and allies, have come to us to renew their earlier friendship and alliance. They have been sent by Simon the high priest, and the Jewish people. And they brought with them a gold shield of 1,000 minas. Therefore, we have decided to write to various kings and countries that they are not to venture to harm them or wage war against them or their cities or their country, and they are not to assist those who fight against them. We have also decided to accept the shield from them. If then any troublemakers from their country take refuge with you, hand them over to Simon the high priest, so that he may punish them according to their law. The consul sent identical letters to King Demetrius, Attalus, Ararthes, and Arsaces. All the countries, Sampasames, the Spartus, Delos, Mydanos, Senion, Saria, Samos, Pamphylia, Lycia, Halicarnassus, Rhodes, Phlaces, Kos, Side, Aridaeus, Gortania, Sidonices, Cyprus, and Cyrene. A copy of the letter was also sent to Simon the high priest. When King Antiochus encamped before Dor, he assaulted it continuously, both with troops and with the siege engines he had made. He blockaded Trypho by preventing anyone from going in or out. Simon sent to Antiochus support 2,000 elite troops, together with silver and gold and much equipment, but he refused to accept the aid. In fact, he broke all the agreements he had previously made with Simon and became hostile toward him. He sent Athanabius, one of his friends, to confer with Simon and say, "You are occupying Joppa and Gazara and the citadel of Jerusalem. These are cities of my kingdom. You have laid waste their territories, done great harm to the land, and taken possession of many districts in my kingdom. Now, therefore, give up the cities you have seized and the tribute money of the districts you control outside the territory of Judea. Or instead, pay me 500 talents of silver for the devastation you have caused, and 500 talents more for the tribute money of the cities. If you do not do this, we will come and make war on you." So Athanabius, the king friend, came to Jerusalem on seeing the splendor of Simon's court, the gold and silver plate on the sideboard, and his rich display, was amazed. When he gave him the king's message, Simon said to him in reply, "It is not foreign land that we have taken, nor have we seized the property of others, but only our ancestral heritage, which for a time had been unjustly held by our enemies. Now that we have the opportunity, we are holding on to the heritage of our ancestors. As for Joppa and Gazara, which you demand, those cities were doing great harm to our people and our country. For these we will give you 100 talents." Athanabius made no reply, but returned to the king in anger. When he told him of Simon's words, of his splendor, and of all he had seen, the king fell into a violent rage. Trypho had boarded a ship and escaped to Orthosaea. Then the king appointed Sennabius commander-in-chief of the seacoast and gave him infantry and cavalry forces. He ordered him to encamp against Judea and to fortify Kedron and strengthen its gates so that he could wage war on the people. Meanwhile, the king went in pursuit to Trypho. When Sennabius came to Gemania, he began to harass the people and to make incursions into Judea, where he took people captive and massacred them. As the king ordered, he fortified Kedron and stationed cavalry and infantry there so that they could go out and patrol the roads of Judea. All right, chapter 16. Final chapter. How long is this one? Oh, we have a traditional length chapter here. And that's the way the second Maccabees is. I may read that one tomorrow. We'll see. Let's finish this up, though. Chapter 16. John went up from Gazara and told his father Simeon what Canabadius was doing. Simon called to his two oldest sons, Judas and John, and said to them, I and my brothers and my father's house have fought the wars of Israel from our youth until today, and many times we have succeeded in saving Israel. I have now grown old, but you, by the mercy of heaven, have come to maturity. Take my place and my brothers, and go out and fight for our nation, and may the help of heaven be with you. John then mustered in the land 20,000 warriors and cavalry. Set out against Canabadius, they sent the night at Modian, rose early and marched into the plain. There facing them was an immense army of foot soldiers and cavalry, and between the two armies was a wadi. John and his people took their possession against the enemy. Seeing that his people were afraid to cross the wadi, John crossed first. When his men saw this, they crossed over after him. Then he divided his infantry and put his cavalry in the center, for the enemy's cavalry were very numerous. They blew the trumpets, and Cinebadius and his army were routed. Many of them fell wounded, and the rest fell toward the stronghold. It was then that John's brother Judas fell wounded, but John pursued them until Canabadius reached Kendron, which he had fortified. Some took refuge in the towers on the plain of Azotus, but John set fire to these, and about 2,000 of the enemy perished. He then returned to Judea in peace. Ptolemy, son of Abibus, had been appointed governor of the plain of Jericho, and he had much silver and gold, being the son-in-law of the high priest. But his heart became proud, and he was determined to get control of the country. So he made treacherous plans to do away with Simon and his sons. As Simon was inspecting the cities of the country and providing for their needs, he and his sons, Mattathias and Judas, went down to Jericho in the 177th year in the 11th month. That is the month of Shebat. The son of Abibus gave them a deceitful welcome in a little stronghold called Doc, which he had built. He served them a sumptuous, a sumptuous banquet, but he had his men hidden there. Then, when Simon and his sons were drunk, Ptolemy and his men sprang up, weapons in hand, rushed upon Simon in the banquet hall and killed him, his two sons, and some of his servants. By this vicious act of treachery, he repaid good with evil. Then Ptolemy wrote a report and sent it to the king, asking him to send troops to help him and to turn over to him their country and its cities. He sent other men to Gazara to do away with John. To the army officers, he sent letters inviting them to come to him so that he might present them with silver, gold, and gifts. He also sent others to seize Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. But someone ran ahead and brought word to John at Gazara that his father and his brothers had perished, and Ptolemy has sent men to kill you also. On hearing this, John was utterly astounded. When the men came to him, he seized them and put them to death, for he knew that they sought to kill him. Now the rest of the acts of John, his wars and brave deeds, he performed, his rebuilding of the walls, and all of his achievements, they are recorded in the chronicle of his high priesthood from the time that he succeeded his father as high priest. And that's it. So we are finished exactly where I thought, an hour and a half. Man, I'm good. Anyways, We might read Maccabees 2 tomorrow, second Maccabees, or we might read something else. Either way, I hope you all have a blessed day, and I'll see you tomorrow. We got to pray, though. May God, the source of all patience and encouragement, enable us to live in perfect harmony with one another in the spirit of Christ Jesus, with one heart and one voice. May we glorify God now and forever. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you. See you guys tomorrow.